Welcome to another edition of the Magpie Circle, and today we take a trip down memory lane. For my money, the best period in Notts County's history since World War II, halcyon era, in which the club competed successfully and beat the likes of Manchester United, Nottingham Forest, Arsenal, Tottenham et al. In the top flight of English football. We used to call it Division 1. It's the Premier League nowadays. And one of the most iconic players of that era. 5 years at the club, 260 appearances, 54 goals. The Flying Scotsman himself. Welcome to Iain McCulloch.
Thank you, Paul.
Hey, delighted to have you. Really looking forward to this one. As I say, it was my era when I was a teenager. I want to deep down look into what it was like to be part of such a hugely successful period in the club's history. We'll be talking that famous goal against Aston Villa. We'll be talking the hat-trick against West Bromwich Albion. We'll be talking that fateful challenge and collision with Gary Bailey that sadly ended your career way too far. And we'll also be kicking off with stories of when you played against Sir Alex Ferguson in Scotland. Okay, Iain, Kilmarnock boy, played for your local club. I believe football ran in your family a little bit. Was it in the genes of your father?
Yeah, my father was a professional. He played with Airdrie, Kilmarnock, St Mirren. He made his name at Airdrie, and he played. He got his cap for the Scottish junior side. So he was obviously to the fore in my thing. But although he never really spoke to me a lot about it. It was my mother that spoke to me about it all. But my father was always in the background, and he was always nudging things forward, unbeknown to me. You know, because I always remember when I came back, I was away in America with the Ayrshire under-18s, and I came back and obviously jet lagging that. And, I came back on the Saturday. And my mother got up. She said, "Oh, you've got to get up this morning. These men are coming to sign you." I'm going, "What?" And it was my father had organised for me to go to Hurlford Juniors, because I was training with United at the time before I went to America with Ali McLeod, and my father was there as a coach. So we went to America, came back, and he'd organised for me to sign because Ali and him had spoken while I was away and says, "Well, we'd better go out on loan or go out and go into the juniors and see how he gets on." Well, that was in the August, and then I signed for Kilmarnock in the November because I'd only 3 months junior because I hit the ground running. I was scoring goals right, left, and centre, and there's a lot of interest. But before when I was at Ayr and on trial, training with him, I was training with him twice a week in that. We played against Falkirk Reserves, and it was Alex Ferguson was playing in the middle of the park for Falkirk Reserves. Yeah, and then ironically he came to Ayr later on, you know, as on some capacity or whatever. But he came to Ayr later on. Obviously, my father and him formed a relationship. And when my father died, he sent a very nice letter to my mother for her. You know what I mean? It was very, very nice of him to remember us. But it was through Jimmy that I think the relationship went further because Jimmy and him were very, very good friends. And it was Jimmy, I think, that got him initially into he was at the coaching schools with Jimmy. Or Jimmy used to go to the Scottish coaching schools, and Fergie was there, like, you know.
Okay, I didn't know that bit. I knew there was a connection because of the original Lilleshall Coaches Association that Sir Alex was very interested in. And Jimmy was kind of one of the leading lights of that back in the day.
Yeah, well, Jimmy was everywhere. He knew everybody, and there was only one voice when it came to coaching, and that was Jimmy's. Unbelievable, he was an unbelievable man.
We'll dive into that relationship that you had personally with Jimmy. He was responsible for bringing you south of the border. But if we could just go back, so you're playing, so it's a reserves game. You come up against Alex Ferguson. Was he someone you knew at that time, or was he effectively no one was at that point? But it's kind of always registered as he then went further on. Yeah.
Yeah, he'd been playing with Rangers, And then he was just retiring really, and he was just helping the kids out at Falkirk, I think, and he played for the reserves, and then he became East Stirling's manager after that. Well, Falkirk and East Stirling's next to one another, sort of thing. So in that area, and as I say, that's where the rest is, as I say, is history, because that's where he started and that's where he came from. And then St Mirren, he went to St Mirren, then he went to Aberdeen, then he went to Man United. You know what I mean? So he was obviously very, very good at what he did because of the things that he won and what he did. You know what I mean?
Would you have been at Notts when Notts played St Mirren?
No,
in the Anglo.
That was just before I came.
Yeah, because he was manager of St Mirren, and Dave Smith tells a great story when they were in Gibraltar.
That's right, yeah.
Poured a jug of orange juice over Fergie's head, and Fergie wasn't too happy about it.
No, I bet he wasn't. No. I can imagine that with Lotus Mini. I can imagine that with Lotus Mini. A few stories about Lotus Mini, but and they can't be repeated on here. You know what I mean? He was a terror, he was.
Hey, he's a great
terror.
He's a great storyteller. You get your move to Kilmarnock, so it's your local club. Things went really well for you fairly quickly.
Well, I was at Ayr United, and then, as I said, that when I came back to America, they put me on loan to Hurlford, or Ali did. And then when I was doing well at the Hurlford, there's a lot of clubs interested, so I went on trials. I was in trial with Partick Thistle, I was in trial with St Mirren, I was in trial with Hamilton, I was in trial with Kilmarnock. So I was getting games and such like, and the ironic thing was, I played a trial for St Mirren, on the Tuesday night, and I scored the winner, and the manager took me off 5 minutes to go, and he says, "Just get changed, son. I'll see you up in my office." So I get changed, and it was a boy, Cunningham, Willie Cunningham was his name, the manager at the time. And he took me up into his office and that. Obviously, my father wasn't there because he was at training with Ayr. So he just says, like, "I want you to sign, son." I says, "Oh, no." I said, "I can't sign unless my dad's here and that, talking and all that." He says, No. He says, "Don't worry about it." He says, "I'll just sign that, put it in the drawer, and then just go back and have a word with your dad. And then if your dad says no, then I'll rip it up." So I goes, "Aye, okay." So I signed it. But you see, for me to get, because I was working as a heating engineer at the time, for me to get to St Mirren training for Prestwick, to get home from where I was working, I could be working anywhere in Ayrshire, get home from work, go to get home, get changed, go to training, to go to Paisley for 6 o'clock, and it was all 6 o'clock starts at that time, training wise. It was a nightmare. So I could manage Kilmarnock with being a little bit late sometimes, you know what I mean? And the manager accepted that, so it wasn't a problem. But I said then, so I went back and I told my dad that I'd signed, and he went absolutely mental. Because I got back about 11:30, he was waiting up for me to ask me how I got on. And I says, "Yeah, I done all right, I scored in that." And he says, I signed. He goes, "What?" He says, "You signed?" And he just like, it's the first time I ever heard him swear. And he just hit the roof like, so he was straight on the phone, because he knew the scout. There was a boy called Maxie Gray, and he knew the scout because my father had played with him or something. So he was straight on the phone to him, and he says, "Get that form ripped up." And then the next night, Kilmarnock came down and signed me. So he obviously was on the phone to Willie Fernie at Kilmarnock, because I'd played with him the week before with Davy Snedden, but they just appointed the new manager, and that was Willie Fernie. But he'd been watching me because he was scouting for Celtic. So he knew me anyway because he'd been watching me when I was at Hurlford. So he actually knew the history and all that anyway. So it was just a case of saying, right, okay, yeah, we'll take him, and that's it. And I went up. My mother was very delighted because she was born in Kilmarnock, so she was a Kilmarnock person. So it was her home club, and that was it. You know what I mean? So, and then as I say, the rest is history, as I say.
So but
I was there for like 4 years.
When you were at Kilmarnock, did you carry on with your trade of heating engineer, or was
it
full time? So it was still effectively, you had a trade, you were doing that and playing. So it's amateur part time, call it what you will. Yeah.
No, it was part time. It was semi professional. You're getting paid £6 or something, but at the end of the day, that was all I wanted to do. The money was irrelevant to me. I just wanted to play football, and that's it. And that was my drive as such, was always to play at the highest level possible. That was what drove me to test yourself and test yourself. And then, as I say, a lot of people, I mean, the likes of the money doesn't make any difference now. To get that much money now, it's unbelievable. Then it was irrelevant. When I first moved down here, I came down here for less money than what I was making in Scotland.
By the time your salary up and
yeah, and my wife's wages and that as well. So it wasn't a case of a money thing. It was an improvement of myself to become a better player, you know. And that is what I strive for, because at the end of the day, if you do, and if you're doing a good job, the money looks after itself. And I trusted Jimmy and I trusted the chairman enough to accept that, and they would look after me. And it proved the point, because I never had any problems with Mr. Dunnett or Jimmy at any point. And this is where you see these agents getting involved now and all that. And this agent does this and that, and I'll go with him, he does this. And at the end of the day, you say to yourself, you're the man in charge, because it's your ability that's getting you to where you should be, you know. And that's the big thing that disappoints me nowadays. It's not about the player's abilities, it's about, oh, he can get this and he can get. That's why there's many players moving about. It's not because the players want it, it's because the agents are making money off it. It's not scandalous, really. And it's the end of the day, they're getting away from what it's all about. It's all about the player's ability. And I think you'd see a lot better football if it was down to the players and not the agents and their attitudes and their mentalities, you know. So, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're settled, you're married, you're a heating engineer, you're enjoying your football at Kilmarnock. You've always wanted to better yourself and improve. So enter Jimmy Cyril, who every player tells legendary stories of his terrible driving, but he would literally be at Torquay at one night and Scotland another. And you're kind of living proof of that. So what do you know about how Jimmy ended up scouting you, watching you and buying you for, I believe, a club record at the time, £80,000?
Yeah, well, the fact it was 75,000, but they put 80,000. It sounded better.
I've got to get my money right when I'm talking to a Scotsman, haven't I?
Yeah.
75.
In those days, we never got 5% of the fee and all that. You know what I mean? But to negotiate your own fee, which was crazy. But that's the way it was then in those days. But as I say, hey ho. But no, I said from Jimmy's point of view, he was there. He'd watched me 8 times or something, seemingly.
8 times.
Yeah, he'd been up there 8 times, and him and Colin Murphy, it was at the time.
Yeah,
would go up. Yeah, him and Colin would go up after training on a Tuesday and watch a game. And there was one game where he was in there 5 minutes, because I remember Colin Murphy telling me, he says, unbelievable. We've left training, come up, Jimmy's driving, he's got his driving gloves on. He's got his driving gloves on and his mints, his Fox's Glacier mints. And he's like, unbelievable, his driving gloves. Unbelievable. He just sits there like that, boom, Jimmy. And he says, they were in the ground 5 minutes, and this is the warm-up. And he says, I've seen enough, Colin, let's go. He just watched the warm-up and he was left. I went back to England again. That's how that was Jimmy all over. You know what I mean? He would watch a player, look at a player, he would look at his stature, he would look at the way he walked onto the pitch, look at the way he walked off the pitch, look at the way he was doing things, look at the way he was dealing with the ball, look at the way he was, you know what I mean? It's just everything is all the mannerisms of the player. And that was how he looked at players. He never looked at all the periphery, but it was just the actual player itself. Then he would talk to somebody in the crowd about something and then he would just, and such and such, and he'd try and get a little bit more information out of them. That's how he did it.
He had, and I've actually seen this. He had a black book, you know, like an A4, not an A5 size black book.
I've seen it.
Yeah,
I've seen it.
Yeah, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of players in it, and little comments next to them.
Stevie Bruce is in there. Gordon Strachan's in there.
Gordon Strachan, yeah, I'll tell you, I saw Gordon when I was doing some work with Scotland with Vauxhall, and Gordon was in there when he was at Dundee, I think.
I played against him in the Dundee reserves.
Yeah,
the Dundee reserves.
And there's a little line, I forget what it said about Gordon. It weren't massively complimentary, and I saw. No. And I said, oh, you was in Jimmy Cyril's black book. And he says, what did he put? Small.
needs to grow or something. I always remember, he's always in comments against Stevie Bruce. He was at Gillingham at the time.
Yeah.
When he was looking at him. You know what I mean? And they were all in there. Unbelievable. That book was unbelievable. I've seen that book, but he had another book. He had two books. He had one for training and one for just notes about players or teams or anything like that. He had another book. I think Charlie had that book. He was phenomenal. And the way he did, but he had a good woman behind him because he was away everywhere when he started at Aldershot and all that. You know what I mean? And he was just 110% football. And some of the stories he used to come out with about Snoz and Glasgow Rose and things like that, it was mental. It just cracks us up, you know what I mean?
So he's making 10-hour round trips to see you at Kilmarnock with his driving gloves on.
Yeah.
So at what point do you start to realise he's watching you? You know, how did it work in those days? Does
it started when he was
out here watching you tonight, or how does it all move towards?
It started at Sheffield United when he was at Sheffield United before he went back to Notts.
Right. Okay.
And we were supposed to be playing Rangers in a pre-season friendly, but I was suspended. So the manager said to me, he says, "Look," he says, "there's somebody coming to watch you tonight." He says, "I'll play you in the first half, just because they're coming." But he didn't tell me who it was. He just says, "There's somebody coming to watch you." I said, "All right." But then I found out later it was Jimmy for Sheffield United. So he played me in the first half, and against Rangers, you're playing the first half, and it's like men against boys. You know what I mean? So it's very difficult. It's a pre-season game. So anyway, he done that, and then nothing obviously came of that. Well, that was in the summer. And then that was when Jimmy left. He came back to Notts in October. Yeah. Is that correct?
That's it.
Well, that's when he started watching me again, because he'd been watching me Sheffield United. But then he came, as I say, he came back to Notts in October or something, and then he started again. And then, as I say, I signed for them in that following March. But he wanted to sign me. He wanted to sign me and the boy called Davy Provan.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't let the two of us go, and Provan ended up going to Celtic.
Yeah.
He ended up going to Celtic because we had a great time that time at Kilmarnock. But as I say, I couldn't move because we'd beaten Celtic in the quarterfinals, the third round of the Scottish Cup, and then the next game was against Rangers. But the deadline was between the two. So if we'd get beat for Celtic, I could have signed on the Monday or the Tuesday, and I'd been ineligible. But because the game was on the Saturday, it was after the deadline. So Kilmarnock wouldn't release me until after that game, as it happened to get beat 4-1. But so that was on the Saturday, and then on the Monday I came down to Nottingham to sign.
Can you remember meeting Jimmy Civil for the first time? What was that like?
Oh, it's him and his missus Kathy. They met us me and my missus at the we flew down the first time. That was that. We flew down on the thing, and we went to the he picked us up at the airport, and then he took us down to the training. They were training at Wilford Lane at the time. Yeah. And Murphy was thinking, it just says come in by, and we're sitting there just watching the training sort of thing, and this is that, and then he took us to the ground, like an old ramshackle ground, and all the wood and that, you can say to yourself, geez. So, but that wasn't the thing for me. The thing for me was it's full time in that. And the terms and such, there was no negotiating and that. It says that's what it is, that's what it is, and that's what it is. And I says, well, that's no problem. I says, at the end of the day, it says, the finished article at this minute in time. You're here to improve. You're here to get better, because that's my job. My job is to get players better. And I says, well, fine, no problem with that. And but it's just the way he spoke. He spoke like very candidly, but very clear, but very plain, and you knew exactly where you stood. You know what I mean? I never had any. Had a couple of times when he'd go at me but it was nuts really, because I couldn't understand what he was going on about, because I played once against Torquay in the League Cup. I played the two games. The first game was down at Torquay, that was when we were at the training session, and we were in this hotel, and it was right on the main road. And we had to cross the main road to get to these training pitches. So we're doing the set pieces and that in the morning, because we've been doing the day before, doing the set pieces and that, and says, Jackson, get the wall lined up. Jack's got the wall lined up, and Jimmy's elbow, and he says, this is what you do to the wall. You know what I mean? You get yourself, force yourself in with the elbow and all that. And then he says, you just have a quick look for the referee. Have a quick look, see where he is. And he just stabbed his heel on Jack's toe and both. The players are absolutely creased up, you know what I mean? But that was his character. That he just done everything the way it was supposed to be in the pitch, you know. And but as I say, we went and played the game at night time, and it was like Bambi on ice. I was sliding all over the place. And he said to me, "What boots have you got?" I said, "Rubbers." He says, "Rubbers." He says, "You know where you are? You know where you are? You're at the seaside, night time, dew on the grass, just sliding all over the place." So I says, aye, right. So he had to go at me for that. And then the next game, I had a poisoned toe. That was back at Meadow Lane. And he came in at half time and he goes, you got a problem? I says, you know, I've got a problem. I've got a poisoned toe. I kind of kicked the ball with my right foot. He says, well, what are you playing for? I says, I told you. You know what I mean? But this is what I'm talking about. It's all about, he was prepared to play me, to make me learn and make me understand what the game's all about. And sometimes it took things like that. And he was prepared to play me and sacrifice me in that game because of my future. And that's the things that get to me when you say to yourself, should have played 11 fit players, but I was never fit because it was always, but in the days there was only 15 or 16 players. You know what I mean? So sometimes we were forced into it anyway. But as I said, the poison tone, Jagged strapped it up, gave me a bigger boot, and I couldn't have kicked the ball. So I come in at half time and he goes, you got a problem? I says, you know, I've got a problem. I said, I got poison toe. He says, have a bath. So I have a bath at half time. But it was all part of the learning process and part of the culture of becoming a proper professional footballer. You know what I mean? And nowadays, you couldn't do that nowadays because you get hung, drawn and quartered because the rules has all changed. You know what I mean? The rules have all changed.
You were married, you had a steady job, you were playing for Kilmarnock, you are uprooted into Nottingham. So yeah. Was that hard to deal with? Did you get homesick, or was it something you just revelled in from day one?
No, it was. You see, at that time there was a lot of players, Scottish players, gone back, like see Matt McGee's and things like that. And I always remember saying to myself, I'm not going to be one of them. I respect him. And I know the first 2 seasons at Notts wasn't the best, but that was part of the learning curve in the sense of you're getting fit. You're back into a setup. It's different. Your body's got to change. Your physique's got to change. And at that time, I was 23, so I wasn't a young chicken, you know what I mean? It was difficult at times, but because we never moved into a house for 8 months, we're staying in digs. The chairman was very good. He gave us his place in the park for 2 months. Oh, yeah. So we stayed there for a couple of months. So we settled in there. And then we got digs in the park with Billy Barraclough and that. So it wasn't so bad for me because I had the football to go to training and such like. But my missus, she'd nothing. She'd nobody. You know what I mean? She was completely isolated. They'd offered her a couple of jobs and all that, but she's a person that'd rather find her own work and things like that. You know what I mean? So that's just the way she is. So she did that, but then she settled eventually. But then she settled more quicker than I did because she'd got a job and she's in there work-wise and such like, you know what I mean? And then it was, after we moved into our new house in Bramcote, we started to get things the way we wanted and it started settling down a bit, you know what I mean? Then, as I say, the first season wasn't the best, the second season wasn't the best, but the third season we kicked on it, you know, and it's all a case of settling in.
So I want to pick up on a lovely story, and I didn't even get it in the book because my great friend Alan Birchinall, who tells me most things that he got up to, which was quite a lot, he never told me this one. So you've signed, but you can't play competitively in matches, like we said earlier, because you've missed the deadline until the following season. So Alan Birchinall is playing for Notts. Sammy Chapman is playing for Notts. Birch is very much a Notts County man. His dad was Notts through and through. Sammy was kind of Forest colours for many years. So tell me, and this, I think, had you actually only just come down on the train? It was the first time Notts were playing a match at midweek or a Saturday. Just take me through the story of what happened and how British clothes got set on fire by Sammy Chapman.
Yeah, I came down in the Monday in the train, and Jimmy met me at the station at Nottingham. Then we went to Diggs in West Bridgford, and then he says on the Tuesday, just come in the morning, just do a bit of light training with the reserves. But it was only the kids then. And I said, yeah. And then you can go home, come back to the game at night time. You know what I mean? I said, okay. So I come in. And as I say, I hadn't really met the players as such. So I come into the dressing room at night time and that, and standing there and that, and the players are all milling about. But it was like a kind of casual thing. They were playing Crystal Palace. And the place was buzzing, really, as a thing, mate. Because Palace were doing quite well, I think. And in the old dressing rooms, it was the old dressing rooms, there was always a table in the front for Jack Today's things and whatever. But the players had took it onto the pitch for looking at the pitch and that. And Sammy Chapman grabbed Birchie. Birchie had the denims on. He had the denim shirt, denim jeans. And I'm like, you know what I mean? No shirt and tie, a suitor in like that. And I'm like, so anyway, this straw hat. So Sammy grabbed the straw hat, put it in the table, filled it with paper and set it alight, and then ran out. And he shouted, Jackson, the fire! And I'm saying to myself, I can't believe this. I cannot believe what I've came to here. You know what I mean? And then when they came out, they all come in and they knew it was Sammy that done it, but Sammy would never own up to it. You know what I mean? But it was brilliant. And I'm going, oh, geez, so what is this? And that's it. But
yeah, how did he take it?
He just went like that. Sammy. And you say to yourself, you know, you go nuts. But in those days, the camaraderie they had was very, very good. You know what I mean? The camaraderie they had was very, very good. And they respected one another. You know what I mean? Sammy had been to Forest and that, because I played against Sammy the year before, because we played Forest in the Texaco Cup.
Texaco Cup, yeah.
The year before, we came down to Nottingham. We got beat 2-1 up at Kilmarnock. We drew 1-1 down here. And as I say, that's when I met Sammy, because I put Sammy on the track at Kilmarnock. He wasn't very happy. But yeah, as I said, it was a culture shock, different way. Training, because you're training full time, different. You know what I mean? I initially in the early days, it used to be training 2 hours, and then you're into the pub, a salad or whatever, a couple of pints, and you get home at 2:30, and you're like, and you're sleeping it off. I was sleeping in to pick my missus up for work and things like that, and you say to yourself, no, you need to start toeing the line a little bit. You know what I mean? So you realise that you've got to go through these stages where you're doing this and doing that, doing things wrong. But then all of a sudden you've got to realise that what you know, it's not going to get you any better and such like, you know what I mean? Then you realise it, and it gets to the stage where you get on the straight and narrow and you keep your head down and you go, and then it just takes off. But your fitness levels are going up as well, and that's the big difference, the strength. Because I always, when I played against English teams in pre-season and such, I always thought the physicality side and the strength side, they were a lot bigger and a lot stronger than what our Scottish ones were. You know what I mean?
So you had to wait a little while, having signed, before you get your chance to play a fully competitive league game. So it's the opening day of the season, probably 5 to 6 months after you've signed. You're down at West Ham. And it's a dream start from a personal perspective. You scored 2. Only slight problem, West Ham scored 5. What can you remember of that?
Well, I remember the goalkeeper was the Kilmarnock goalkeeper, Bobby Ferguson, at that time as well. But I always remember the big thing about it was Billy Bonds, because I was playing kind of wide rightish then. And I came up against him a couple of times, and he just said to me, he says, listen, do not take liberties. And I just looked at him, because I'm only new to it. He says, listen, he says, just you do what you're doing. He says, but you kick me, I'll kick you back. I says, that's no problem. I said, I'll kick you back. But we had that rapport. And after the game, he came up and he goes, "Brilliant, well done, thanks very much, great game." He says, "Keep smiling and keep going." You know what I mean? And that, to me, stuck with me, because at the end of the day, that was my first taste of that English football. And you're at West Ham and they're throwing bananas at Pedro and Benji and that. You're saying to yourself, and then they're blowing bubbles, and there's bubbles all over the place. We're forever blowing bubbles. And that was like a culture shock to me and that at that time, you know what I mean? As regarding, I'd never witnessed anything like that, you know. As I say, Pedro and Benji just took it off the back and just ate it up and threw it away, you know what I mean? And they just took it the way it's gone.
Yeah. What was that? There were 2 seasons, weren't there? One where you finished reasonably well, the other not quite so well. You're adapting.
The first season we finished just outside the top 6, I think.
Yes.
The second season we struggled. But when I first came, I always remember Jimmy. He had to go to Stoke. It was the last game of the season, and he had to go to Stoke and get at least a point. And Jimmy took me into his office on the Friday before I went home, because I was at home at the weekends, either on a Thursday or a Friday, depending on what was happening training-wise or games, because I was playing for the reserves. So the games would either be on a Tuesday night or a Thursday night or whatever. When this time it was a Thursday night, so I played on the Thursday night, and he took me into his office on the Friday morning. He says, "Iain, come in." He says, "Right, listen, son." He says, "I'm sorry, I've signed you now." He says, "Because this could go a bit pear-shaped." He says, "If we don't get a result tomorrow," he says, "we're relegated." And he says, "I never signed you for that." I says, that's the way it goes, boss. You know what I mean? I wasn't going to jump ship or anything like that. I mean, at the end of the day, it was him. And he just says, "But you just keep going, just keep doing the things you're doing, and we'll be all right." And that was it. But he had the I don't know whether the managerial skills to do things like that to players. His man management skills were second to none, as far as I was concerned. He's always talked to me at the right time or bought me at the right time or whatever. You know what I mean? And he knew his players, and he knew what to do to go at them. It wasn't until later, 2 or 3 years down the line, where he was losing a little bit, in the sense of the likes of the respect the players had for him. He was losing it a little bit because of the certain things he was doing. You know what I mean? Towards the latter time his career. You know what I mean? Before Howard came in.
It's very perceptive of you to say that, because I was going to come on to this. So Jimmy makes a very inspired decision to bring in Howard Wilkinson, who at that point fans had no idea who he was. People in the game knew he would be part of that English FA technical side of things, but certainly as fans, no one had a clue who he was. And Howard tells the story of his first meeting with Jimmy, and he recounts how Jimmy said to him, and we'll take a few of the F's out in it. The lads will not play for me anymore. The lads will not run for me anymore. I need you to come in. And Howard's turned round and said, "Well, I'm not here to put the cones out." And Jimmy's gone, "You're not here to put the cones out. You will train the team. You will pick the team." And Howard's gone, "Are you sure I'm actually going to pick the team and not you?" He says, "No, you will pick the team. The lads denny run for me anymore." So what you've just said there was kind of Jimmy recognised that.
He recognised it, yeah.
Which takes a lot.
But that was the type of man he was. He would accept that. But he would accept it in his own way, and he would do it in his own way. He wouldn't accept it in the sense of somebody coming in and telling him he needed to do that. But because he did, you know what I mean? That's the difference. That's the difference. He knew in his own mind, because, I mean, I always remember we went to Wrexham one day and we get beat 3-0 or something. And he said, just before the boys got off, we go back to Nottingham, just before the boys got off the bus, he says, "Jackson," he says, "they're in tomorrow. Everybody in tomorrow. Down at the ground, 10 o'clock, everybody's in." He says, "You don't run on a Saturday, you're running a Sunday. So we're all in the next day. 6 laps, 6 halves, 6 sides, and then home. We're there half an hour. Just over half an hour, 3/4 of an hour. And he was sat up at the back of the stand watching. He wasn't there in the dressing room. Jack was in the dressing room, but you never seen Jimmy. But he was up the back of the stand watching, making sure you did it. You know what I mean? That was the things that, as I say, that was his mentality, because he was always looking at, whenever you walk through a turnstile, Jimmy's seen you, and he's seen your demeanour, see how, if he didn't think you were up for it, he would come and speak to you. Say, right, this, that, just to lift you up, just to get you over there. But he always looked at players, their mannerisms, the way they walked, the way they spoke, the way they did. And that was his man management skills, as regarding how he knew players and how the players ticked. You know what I mean? And what he was going to get out of them that day. And 9 times out of 10, he roughly knew what he was going to get, whether he was going to get a win or whether he was going to get a thingy. You know what I mean? But the thing was, when we had the season we got promoted, pre-season, he came to me and he goes, "You can get a bet on." I said, "Yeah, I can get a bet on." He says, "Right." He says, "I went and Howard and him and the little fella. So they had a bet on us getting promoted. I think it was 60-61 or something. And this is before a ball was kicked. And he was just looking at pre-season, because the pre-season games that we had, we played against the team, Moseley or something, from Manchester way. The very last game before this is when he came. Just after that game, he came to me. We were at Medley Lane. It was closed doors. We were playing Moseley, pre-season game. We won about 10-0 or something. And that was when he came to me and says, "These boys are ready, eh? Coach," to Howard, "Coach, these boys ready? Yes, eh? Let's go. Home to tea." A different ball game, Jimmy. You know what I mean? That's just the way he was. You know what I mean? As I said, you took him for what he is, and he had his bad points. Everybody's got the bad points, but his good points were very, very good. As I say, his man management skills. But I can only speak of myself, because he was always brilliant with me, and I never had any problems with him. But that's because I respected him and the way he did. You know what I mean? And the way he treated me.
So you've touched on there already that Jimmy clearly felt it could be a special season. Yeah, with the inverted commas alleged bet at 66-1 when I think we were about 3rd or 4th favourites to be relegated.
Yeah.
So what did Howard bring to Notts County then?
He brought better organisation, better detail to training. Jimmy's coaching as such, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think in my first season when I was there, it was only Jack and Jimmy, and that was the training. Yeah. Well, pre-season, we're finished at 12 o'clock every day. And you're saying to yourself, "Geez, so," you know what I mean? 2 hours. But it was all methodical, it was all done, and it was like a timed thing. 10 minutes, 10 minutes this, 10 minutes that, 20 minutes. And it was all done, 2 hours, and it was gone, finished. And you were in the bath, pre-season. Never been known, you know what I mean? But that's because it was just him and Jack. He had nothing else, he had nobody else, he had no coaches, didn't Mickey Walker or anything like that at that time. You know, just him and Jack was doing it all. And it was too much, you know what I mean? You can see them now, they've got hundreds of coaches. I've got a coach for this left back, a coach for the right back, a coach for, you know what I mean? You got a coach for everything. You know what I mean? You even got a coach to take to the ground. But it's crazy now, the number of players, the number of people that's involved compared to when it was back then, and it was just Jimmy and Jack. That was it, Jimmy and Jack.
So what did Howard do then? How did Howard? You say organisation, but there was diet, there was science, stats, all sorts of things Howard brought in, and you kind of you spent a few hours on the training ground with Howard, didn't you?
Yeah, 1 or 2. We pushed to play the cones. The cones beat us some days. But then we played the cones. I always remember when we played against the cones, and we played against, that goal at Ipswich. We were playing against the cones on the Thursday before we left on the Friday. We go down in the coach, and we're there at training, and he's got the cones out. He did very well with me with the cones, because of the cones of my runs in the back of people, running and out, and in and out the cones. You know what I mean? And then you go down the left and get it back to Raymond, and Raymond would put it down. But the passing was all, because the way the cones were laid out, that was the opposition. And he would always have an opposition, and he was always, this is what they do. And always the opposition, this is what they do. But this is how we're counteracting it. So from a negative side was, this is the opposition. But the positive side was, this is what we're doing to counteract it and beat it. You know what I mean? So from that perspective, he brought that organisation, that discipline into that side of it, you know? And that was the big thing for me, in the sense of how I improved a great deal then under Howard regarding doing that. The physicality side of it, from Jimmy's point of view, I improved that way through him. But the game management as such, through Howard, I got better at doing things.
Howard also said, because he'd been watching you play the previous season while he was serving his notice at the FA, and he said he'd watched the players and he felt that one thing this group could do was pass. And that promotion season was underscored by a completely different style of passing approach, wasn't it? It was kind of total football before total football was largely introduced into the UK. He brought Brian in, didn't he? Passing out from the back, Raddy couldn't kick it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, he changed Keller. Keller was a centre forward. Jimmy signed him as a centre forward as a kid, because he's a big brute, wasn't he? Yes. He was only a kid at 16. He was a brute. He used to manhandle people everywhere. You know what I mean? He was for his size and that. And then Howard changed him into a centre half and that, and got him playing and got him thinking. Now that's somebody who was. And don't get me wrong. He was on a knife's edge. He could have went either way, Killer. You know what I mean? Howard turned him into a player. He was on a slippery slope initially, until Howard came, and Howard was the saviour, really, because he changed his system, changed his player, changed his outlook, changed his physique, changed his eating habits, as you say. So he had a lot of. I never had a dietary thing, but I know he gave one or two dietary things to do because of their weight and such like. But as I say, I never had that. I was like an athlete.
Howard told a great story of his first day or his first match, which was New Year's Eve, previous season, before Cambridge United, home to them on Boxing Day. You were at the post. You're staying overnight at the Post House, Sandy Acre. And
yeah, well, I was a big
Scotsman, your fellow Scotsman, Mr. Masson, you were kind of head of social, weren't you? Having a drink on New Year's Eve, and Howard,
everybody in my room, 12 o'clock, 5 to 12, in my room for a drink, bring in the bells, end of. That was that. We were up there 5 to 12 in his room, and then they get a chap at the door just after the bells. Somebody complained about the noise. So they tell Jimmy's up, chatting, banging on the door, him and Howard, and he's going, right, what's happening here? It was Howard.
Howard, yeah.
Yeah, and they're like, we're just bringing the bells in. Room, bed. Yeah. And that was his, I mean, at the end of the day, to be fair to him, you can understand it for a thing, but we weren't doing anything wrong. We were doing something wrong. We broke a curfew, but at the same time, we were only having one drink, and with a can of beer or whatever, that was it. It wasn't as if it was a session, you know what I mean, where they're all there till 3 a.m. and steaming and all that, you know what I mean? But that was all it was, just bringing the bells in, as Scotsmen do, because at that time there was about 5 or 6 Scottish people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that was how it was. But as I say, he dealt with it in his own way, and he took his time. That was the thing about Howard. He was very methodical. He was prepared to be patient and wait his time until such time as it was to get rid of people. That's the way he was, because he wouldn't do it ruthlessly and just go bang, 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 bang. Although I do believe that Big Stubbsy could have been treated a bit better the way he did that. You know what I mean? To him, just like exclude him. That's, to me, I didn't like that at the time. You know what I mean? Because he'd been a servant to the club and he'd done very well. But Howard realised that he wasn't capable of playing at the next level. And this is what I'm talking about, getting better. You've got a level, and then you've got to go to the next level, and the next level, and the next level, and the next level. And every level you go up, it's a different game. It's a different game, and you've got to be up for it. Not just physically, but upstairs as well. And that's the difference. Where a lot of players don't understand that. They think it's just physicality. It's no physicality. It's brain, it's mental. In the sense of you've got to be moving, you've got to be 2 or 3 moves. But the Liverpool team at that time in the 80s, you could never get near them. Because everything, the ball was always moved before you could get near them. You couldn't close them down. You know, nowadays where they're closing down and this, that, and it's a different ball game then. Everything was move, pass and move, pass and move, pass and move. And you could never get near them. And that's the difference when you're going up in levels. You've got to try and counteract that, you know. Whereas now, I mean, football nowadays, I can hardly watch it, to be honest with you, because it's too slow and thinking passing it here, passing it there, and then you get it there. And then you touch them and they're diving all over the place, and it's scandalous. Absolutely scandalous. You know what I mean?
One player we've not mentioned really so far, or one person at Notts, fellow Scotsman, Don Masson. Tell me about Don.
Little fella, top man. He is. He's a shining example in the sense of he set his stall out for when he was 15 of what he wanted to do in football, and that was to play when he was at Middlesbrough, to play in their first team. Then he achieved that. Then it was to play for Scotland, and he achieved that. Then it was to captain Scotland, and he achieved that. And then he was at QPR. That was when he got his cap. He started getting his caps when he was at QPR. Then he went to Derby. Then he came back to Notts. But then he set his stall out again at Notts. I'll be honest with you, he wasn't the most liked player at Notts between the players because of his arrogance and such like. But that was the way he would always been, if we were to win at 10 o'clock, he'd been at 9 o'clock. Difference. He would be there at 9 o'clock and he'd do his little setup, his little session, his little weights and such like. Then he would do a little running session. Then he'd be ready to train with us at 10 o'clock. He would do what we were doing at 10 o'clock and such like until 12, half 12 or whatever. Then he would do another little session himself. Then he'd come in and pick his clothes up and go. You would never see him. So socially wise, you would never see him. That was when I first came. You know what I mean? Me and Arthur Mann used to play golf with him. Used to go and play golf. After 3 or 4 holes, he'd just walk off. I say to Arthur, what's he doing? Oh, he doesn't like getting beat. Because me and Arthur were quite good at it at the time, you know what I mean? And he's like, he doesn't like getting beaten. I'm going, what? Oh no, he just walks off the golf course. He'd done that 2 or 3 times. And you say to yourself, but that was the way he was. That was the way he was. And that's what got him. That it takes all types, but that's what got him to where he got to. And you can't fault him for that. If that's the way he wants to do it, that's what took him to do that. You know what I mean? Me personally, I couldn't do that. Bits of it, I could, because you've got to shut yourself away and you've got to be self-isolating in the sense of that you've got to be focused on what you're doing and what you want to do. And that's the big thing from the little fella. And that was, it learnt me a great deal in the sense of it's no what they do, it's what you do. You've got to do it. Nobody else. You've got to do it. You know what I mean? And that's where you've got to get from your fitness point of view. And looking after yourself, you've got to be mentally and you've got to be strength-wise upstairs. You know what I mean? And you've got to do that. Because that's the only thing that's going to get you to where you want to be. And the big killer's done that. He's done that. I mean, look what he achieved. You know what I mean? And he's realised. He realised the error of his ways early days. And otherwise, if he'd have been down the road as well. But he realised, and all of a sudden, he changed himself about, and look what he achieved. Different ball game. You know what I mean? But that was a little fella's influence again as well. You know what I mean? As regarding getting a hold of him and speaking to him and things like that. You know, so, and that it takes all types. It takes all types. As I said, there is room for, because that's what makes a team. with camaraderie. So it makes all different. You're all different types. Everybody can't be the same. If everybody's the same, you're not going to go anywhere. You know what I mean? You've got to have things in there that's going to go one and all. You've got to diversify and do that, and diversify and go there and do this. And that's what it is about it, as a team. You know what I mean? All different areas of the team. You've got somebody's got a good left foot, somebody's got a good right foot, somebody's got a good header, and somebody's good at shooting, whatever. It's all different things. And that's what makes it a team, you know what I mean? And we had that. We were lucky.
What was the ingredient, or why did the club achieve? You know, it was nigh on impossible in a way to get back into the top flight that season. You got promotion, clinched it at Chelsea. You finished second, I think it was, behind West Ham.
Yeah.
What was it that gave little, not unfashionable Notts County the ability to get promoted?
The strength in the players mentally, in the sense of that's what they wanted to achieve, every single one of them. But the big thing was that they wanted to achieve it because of the supporters as well, because it was a homely club. It was a club where everybody, I'm not saying anything disrespectful, but it was a club where that was all they had. A lot of them, that's all they had was the football club. And it took them it took them from 1970 or whatever to 1980, 81 to get that. And so it was 11 years of Jimmy's journey, with a break in between when he went to Sheffield United. But he knew, and people set out, like Jimmy has set out visions as regarding where he wants to be in a certain time. That's what Howard did. He wanted to, look what he achieved when he first came to Notts. He became England manager. Although it was only interim, right? But he achieved. That's the epitome. That's the top of the pile when you're doing that sort of thing. But that was what he did. They won the Premier League with Leeds. You know what I mean? But he did it his way, the way he wanted to do it, and he brought players in that could do a specific job, like bringing Vinnie Jones in. He knows he needed the thing, mate. You know what I mean? He needed a hard man in there to win the ball and such like, and get things going and get a grip of some of them, grab them with the throat and give them a shake and get them out of what they're doing. You know what I mean? But as I said, it takes all types. It takes all types, and that's what he did, and that's what he achieved. And fair play to him. You know.
You've said to me before, Ian, some clubs, the band of players are both inseparable off the pitch as well as on it. So always out together, etc. I think you've said to me, talk a little bit about it now, that wasn't necessarily the case with the group that we had at Notts, was it? Just talk to me a bit about that dynamic.
No, towards the end, it was getting to that sort of thing. But it was three or four culture for Leicester, Big Trevor and Goody and Hunty, for Leicester Derby sort of thing. So they were together, and then there was me, Mick, and Charlie or whatever, and then there was Benji and Pedro. Benji kept himself to himself, and there was Rash and Pedro and Keller and that. You know what I mean? Then there was Nigel, who came in later on, Raymond to come in. And it was all like little bits here. But when they came on, as I said, when they crossed that white line, they all knew their job because of the training we had done that week. And they all wanted the same achievement in the sense of they all wanted to win that game. But by winning that game, they wanted to win the next game. By winning the next game. But see, we had 3 years in the first division.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realise that. And we never had any money compared to what the bigger boys had. But what we achieved far outweighs, in my eyes, far outweighs anything that anybody else has achieved, because we stayed there for 3 years and the minimalist of money. As I said, it wasn't all about the money for me. It was all about trying to get there. And then, as I say, I could have moved before the week, 2 or 3 weeks before I broke my leg. I could have moved to Everton, but the club wouldn't let me go.
Is that right?
Yeah, because we played them in the FA Cup, didn't we?
Yeah.
Everton and Howard Kendall came down that day and put a cheque on the table. They wanted to buy me. Really? And they said no. Yeah. So he says no, can't do it. And then 2 weeks later, I broke my leg, and that was me done. And that's the irony of football. But I've not got any regrets. I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change things. I wouldn't go back and say that. You know what I mean? But that was how I could have been. And then that I could have took off if I'd gone to Everton, because it's the more fashionable club and such. Like you're playing with.
Were the team, weren't they? They were the team at the time. You know,
Oh, they were that team.
Radcliffe centre half, Andy Gray, Yoshidi, all of those. I mean, they were the team. Yeah. Reedy, they were the team.
Oh, they were the team then. They were the team then. As I said that, and as I said at that time, the club couldn't let me go because I'd been out for a long time. But we'd gone 8 or 9 games undefeated up until that cup game in the league. So we were starting to claw our way out of trouble. You know what I mean? But as I said, at the end of the day, from my point of view, I enjoyed every minute of it. You know what I mean? I wouldn't change it. But that's life, isn't it? You just got to go on with it.
Let's rewind just a little bit to the day of Stamford Bridge, Chelsea. Horses on the pitch invasion, and I speak from personal experience. Being in the Notts away end that day, it was a great day after you got on the train going back up from St Pancras to Nottingham. During the game itself and walking in and out of Stamford Bridge, I have to say, it wasn't great. What was that day like for you and for your teammates and for Howard and for Jimmy?
To be honest with you, I mean, I'm thinking back to the game, and in the game sort of thing, I didn't think we were under any duress or under any pressure to an extent, in the sense of that, we're at Chelsea, we're at Stamford Bridge, the hooligans are there, But I thought we were quite comfortable on the day. Yeah. And then when Rash and Trevor scored, then I thought we were well worthy winners. You know what I mean? Because we'd been beaten against Watford the week before, and everybody gave the ghost up.
Yeah.
Not the players. The players didn't give the ghost up, but a lot of people gave the ghost up and thought that that's it, Notts have blown it and that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, as I said, the thing was we were there to we're going to create history or whatever. But at the same time, if you and I think this is a big thing that we did, was you just took each game as it came, and that was part of Howard's remit, in the sense of how he went about his business. That, right, that's that game, right, that's that done with, right. He would put that in his locker and say, right, that's that, and then he would go back to it later for different notes if we're playing them again or whatever. You know what I mean? That was the way. That's how methodical he was, and that's what I'm saying. When we came down to, we're playing against Chelsea, right, this is what we're doing. So every week we're playing a different team, and training was geared to that team that Saturday, and the next week was the same. And the next week was the same. It wasn't the same training every week, because you weren't playing the same team every week. You're playing different teams every week. And that was where Howard came to the fore, in the sense of that he had his scouts watching players and watching teams and this, that, and the next thing, and watching how they played. So he would sort the training accordingly to how we were going to play that Saturday. That was his remit, really, in the sense of how he organised us. And how he got us to the pinnacle of where we got to, basically. You know what I mean?
You've completed promotion, and having spoken to various people, I think it's quite interesting, the dynamic of your coach journey home. Now, Howard told me, didn't even get on the coach, went out with his wife and some friends for a meal, I think he said in Cockfosters, so he stayed down in London. Jack done it. Very, very, very business-like, very, very rarely shows any emotion. Told me for my book, sadly, Jack no longer with us. I spent 2 magical hours with him at the Betchamin Arms at St Pancras about 6 years ago, when I was first doing the book. He was the first interview. And of course, he lived in London mostly. And he said, I was so pleased and couldn't believe we'd actually done it, that although I only lived, 4 or 5 miles from Stamford Bridge, whatever it was, he said, I got on the team bus to ride on it all the way back to Nottingham, just to experience and savour the satisfaction of completing the journey from having bought the club when they were 90th in the Football League. He said, and then I got my driver to take me back home. So what was that? What was that evening like?
Oh, I'll be honest with you, that evening, right? There was about 4 players went out when we get back. And I was back home. I was back home before 12:30. My missus goes, "What's the matter with you? You know, feeling well or something?" You know what I mean? I was back home before 12:30. This is what I'm talking about as regarding the players and such like. We got back to Nottingham. We got the reception for the supporters and such like. But then there was about 4 or 5 of us went out into Nottingham, and that was it. There wasn't the whole squad going out. You know what I mean? There's only 4 or 5 of us, and as I say, I was home for 12:30 or something. You know what I mean? But it was like a build up. The Tuesday night was better against Cambridge.
Yeah,
the Tuesday night was better against Cambridge. It was more euphoric and this, that, and the next thing. And we went to reception after that at Trent Bridge after that game, and that was a bit better. You know what I mean? Than what the Saturday was. I couldn't answer you, and I could not tell you for why, because all players have got different mentalities, or different ways of doing things, or whatever. But when, as I said, on that pitch, they all fought for one another, they all helped one another. You knew that if somebody was in trouble, they'd go and help them, and that was what they had. You know what I mean? As a group, social wise, it wasn't as big as maybe some clubs have got a social thing. It might not be a good thing if I'm having a good social thing. I'd rather all go and golfing or whatever. You know what I mean? Or having outings and such things. But whenever we had anything, there was anything to be done, there was anything to be there, they were there, and you knew you could rely on them. And that was the big thing. When you crossed that white line, you knew that you could rely on them, and you knew exactly what they were doing. And the big thing as well was that if there was things happening off the pitch, they would rally to help. You know what I mean? Which was kept away from the public. If there was any problems, anything like that, then they would rally to help to make things a lot easier for them or whatever. So from that point of view, then they were caring people, caring players, you know, which was maybe not in the same eyes as what you see nowadays, where they're all going nuts and this, that. We never had that. We never had that. But at the same time, we had a spirit within, which was there, and everybody was trying to do their best that they could to try and get that club, because it was a club for us, for me anyway. It was a club, and it gave me my chance and such like. And Jimmy, I respected Jimmy and this, that, and the next thing. But the club was there, and the supporters was there. Although there wasn't a great lot of them, but there was a core there that was very, very good to you. You know what I mean? And they deserved better. And to me, I was very happy and pleased when we got promoted that night. When I think it was only about 12,000 in the Cambridge game, but there that night we got them promoted, and that was although we had promoted on the Saturday, but in the Tuesday night against Cambridge, it was better. There was a great atmosphere in that.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone on record before, Ian, that unquestionably, and I was 17, 18 at the time, so this was a great time for me anyway. The best Notts team I've seen, okay, with Howard, that was the best team, bar none. And, you know, even putting it into the context of what Neil Warnock achieved at Notts and getting them into the top flight, and had, again, a group of very, very talented young players who went on to establish themselves as regular Premier League players, Mark Draper, Tommy Johnson, Craig Short. But I thought the team that we had, your team, was the best because we competed effectively in the top flight. You know, when we got there, because kind of Don by that point had almost kind of reached his peak and was and actually retired in the second season. And Howard created a system, and you as a group of players, whereby you replaced Don in the top flight of English football, and it didn't affect you, did it? You know, it didn't affect you. Again, Howard's moved on, worked something out. You know, he used the phrase that in terms of maximising the abilities that they had, David Hunt, Mark Goodwin, 10 out of 10. You know, they played about 750
that was
between them at Notts.
Yeah, but that was his forte. You know what I mean? This is what I'm saying. This is why he was a good coach as such, or a good because he knew exactly what the players could do, and he didn't ask them to do anything they couldn't do. And this is where you get together. You know what I mean? Whereas he was always testing me, and at the end of the day, how can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do? And at the end of the day, I thrived on that. You know what I mean? I thrived on that personally because I was always trying to achieve better, to become better. But it was only from my personal point of view. You know what I mean? And if I knew I had to do something to do it, I'd do it. And that was the Masson thing. Masson thing was that his mentality was that that's what he's going to do that. So that's what he did. And that's what, so at the end of the day, nobody can take anything away from what he achieved. He played for first team football. He played in English first division. He played for his country. He captained his country. You know what I mean? He got a team promoted as captain. And you can't ask for much more than that for a player. You know what I mean? Yeah, he had one or two pitfalls in the sense of the way he did things and the way he went about things. But everybody in life who you achieve, you're going to crumble somewhere. You know what I mean? You can't achieve everything in life without having little pitfalls, you know.